Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Harry Wolf, your faithful co-host, your jubilant narrator, your vigilant coder, your always cheerful hacker, here again with a new video, and I'm glad to see you back around these parts. We're going to follow up last week's video where we talked a little bit about Svelte, S-V-E-L-T-E, that's Svelte baby, which is a new framework that's on the old JavaScript market framework places that is different from other frameworks that you might have encountered like React, Angular, Vue, and Ember. I always count like this for some reason. I don't know why, but it's 4, whatever. Svelte is a little bit different because rather than having a runtime where it will run your code in the browser at runtime, Svelte is entirely a compiler-based framework. If you have more questions about Svelte, check out my previous video where I talk about it in depth and then play with Svelte as well. Today we're going to be playing around with this thing called Sapper. The video is going to be called Getting Dapper with Sapper because I love me some play on words. Sapper is essentially a framework on top of Svelte that is more opinionated and also more feature rich. I have done some very brief readings about Sapper, but again, like last week, you and I are going to learn together what it means to make a very basic Sapper application. What's neat about Sapper, from just reading the basic documents, is that it takes a full stack point of view in making an application. Whereas if you were to make a Create React app or a Ember app or Angular app, those mostly focus on the front end side of things where they just help you make a front end application. And if you need a back end, that is not what they worry about. What's kind of wild about Sapper is that it provides a full stack experience out of the box where you have both backend capabilities from Sapper and front end capabilities from Sapper, which is exciting. So let's start jumping into the actual documentation and start reading about what it means to get Dapper with Sapper. I need these on because I can't see when I'm writing if I don't have my glasses on. So here we are on Sappers Homepage. It's actually very neat that it has a little link back to Svelte. If you want to go back to Svelte, if you want to go back to Sapper, you go back to Sapper and ring around the rosy. Here we go, posy. So this is the Sapper website, the next big thing in web development. It's the best of both worlds. As I was saying before, all the SEO and progressive enhancements of a server-rendered app with the slick navigation of an SPA, which stands for Secret Potato Assassin. Right? No, it stands for Single Page App, but I could hope that it stands for that. It's a framework for building applications, so I have some things here about how to get things started. I'm going to get to that in a second. Actually, while I have myself here, let's actually get that started. I'm going to go into videos. We're going to use Rollup. So this is what's interesting about Sapper because it's from the author of Rollup, actually. Rollup is essentially a modular bundler like Webpack. The main difference with Rollup is that it's ES modules first and doesn't have to worry about some of the legacy things that Webpack has. Rollup is pretty popular in the world of library authors. If you're writing a library, be it a React library or just a very basic library and utility library, Rollup is very good about creating an eventual distribution bundle that is most optimized for consuming by clients. Webpack is a little bit more suited for application development, but because I am curious about Rollup and I do enjoy, you know what, let's be safe and play with what I know, and we'll use Webpack to start with. So I'm going to copy this starter thing here. I'm going to call this Sapper is Dapper because I love me some puns still. Going to install that, and while that's installing, which took no time at all, I'm actually going to then install the dependencies. Let's do that as well. So while it's going on in the background, let's start looking at the documentation of Sapper itself. It's in early development, which is great. Oh, it's already done. Man, that is fast. So if I go back into Let me enhance this. Let me make this bigger. Zoom. Zoom, 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 zoom. 2. Oh yeah, you can read that real good, except now everything's just way too big. So if I go back into here, let me make sure my face is not getting in the way of all this. So if I go into here and I go into CD videos, Sapper, if I now run npm run dev. Okay, sweet. So I got Sapper installed, and now if I copy this and if I go here, then I get, oh, well, that's a fun little introduction. Great success. High five. Sapper is running. Awesome. That's really funny that we're seeing Borat for a Sapper. Okay, great. Funny joke. So let's close this and let's actually look into here. We have here in Sapper some files made for us by default. We have package.json with all these built-in commands. Right now I'm using Sapper dev to get things up and going. Here's my webpack config file, which is using Svelte loader. It's a very, oh, there's a server as well. Very neat. So I'm imagining, so let's actually start committing these things because I like to do that. So add Sapper is Dapper. And we can kind of go from there about all the things that we're going to modify with our application. Cool. So we have here the documentation for Sapper, and it's an early development thing, which means that I probably shouldn't make it for production, but I probably could if I wanted to. And oh boy, we got so many things to read. So what's interesting about Sapper, from what I'm reading so far, is it kind of takes a stance that your directory structure is mirroring what your application is rendering. So I go into source. Let's actually sidebar, toggle sidebar visibility. Nope, not what I wanted. Zen mode. Sweet. So if I go into source, I can see here I got my client code, which is running on the client, my server code running on the server. This zoom is way too much. I can't even use anything. Let's go back down to 1. Thank you all. Okay. And then Sapper follows this concept of routes. And again, because this is being built on top of Svelte, you have all the wonders of Svelte as well. It has some built-in components, which is interesting. This is the title attribute. But here, if I wanted to, I could say this changes. And I save that. And this changes. Sweet. Go back to what it was before. Actually, I can do into hello YouTube. Save that. And I'm getting some weird errors about. So hello YouTube. All right. Index Svelte route. So this is being built on top of Svelte, which means that I have all the powers of Svelte at my disposal. So I want to actually add some JavaScript here. I could do that where I could say, you know, let open equals false. This is my same example from before. Toggle open equals open, and then here I'm just gonna do this inline to make this nice and easy, where I can just say open, and then on click. Why not this be toggle? Save layout. And now again, this is toggling nice and pleasantly. So let's look back at the documentation. Let's make this a little bit bigger so I can read things. And then this is talking about the application structure, which is interesting that it's taking, you know, there's 2 ways that you can go with a framework. You can go configuration heavy or you can go convention heavy. Configuration heavy means that I can kind of make my application look whatever it wants to. As long as I set up my configuration correctly, then the framework will know how to talk about my application. Convention heavy says, I've already done the configuration for you. Follow what I've set up and do what I've already described, and you're going to have a great time. There's pros and cons of both. Sapper here seems to be very convention heavy, and That gets you some advantages because once you understand the conventions that they have built in, it means that you can have the framework work for you. So here we're talking about, there's 3 entry points for your app: client, server, and a service worker, which I don't, maybe one day I'll make a video about a service worker, but I'm still not, it still feels like a thing that's not fully implemented correctly, so I don't worry about it that much. Client stuff is what's made on the client side, which makes sense. Server is a normal Express server, which is neat. Is that true? So I go back down into here. I can see the server, and then Polka is like a Express compatible, a Express API compatible server that's just smaller. And this is here just serving up Sapper, and there's the Sapper middleware. Cool. And service work I don't care about. And then here's where things get interesting. It's the meat of your app for the juicy details. Static, won't put things in static, that's fine. So routing. Pages are Svelte components written in Svelte files, and the file name determines the route. For example, route/index is the root of your site. File called routes about or routes about/index will correspond to the about route. So if I actually want to make, so I already have an about thing right here. So if I go back to my Sapper app, there is about, and that's it. This is right here. I can say, how's it going? How's it going? That's working. And again, Svelte head is what customizes the document.title of the application. And here we have a blog. Now see, I was hoping to code all this, but now I'm just kind of exploring it with you because what's interesting about Svelte is that it has the ability to have backend functionality built in. So this blog/index.json is essentially an endpoint. So if I wish I could see the title bar, toolbar, there it is. Now I can see things. So if I were to go and do blog/index.json, message not found, index.json, or is it just index? Nope. How would I see that? So if I go to index.svelte, it's fetching blog.json, which is, oh, I see. So because of the way that Svelte Sapper routes work, blog/index.json.json would be the same thing as if I had made a new file of blog.json.js. Does that make sense? So depending upon where your files are in your file system is how Sapper understands where to serve them up. As a convenience, there's 2 ways to make the same route, which other web servers do as well. You could have this be routes/blog.json.js. So when you go there, it'll serve up the blog JSON files. Or you could nest it inside of blog folder and call it index to actually get the, so if I do this, there's my, there's the JSON. Now this is what's really neat because this file, index.json, is handling the GET request. So when a client requests this is like an Express app, I'm going to read the contents, which is up here, which is being imported from here, and then returning it in a JSON response. When I want to render that, so if I go back to here, go to blog, I can see a list of posts. When I want to render that, there is this script context module, which is kind of like the it's kind of like a little bit of a hack, a little bit, because you're kind of overloading the script tag, having a different context. I understand it, but essentially it's saying that before the actual Svelte component is rendered, we're going to run this preload function that will essentially do the, like if you were in the React land, it would be component will mount, or it's the code that's ran in the constructor essentially. So the stuff that's ran before the component is ran. And what this is doing is exposing a preload function by convention, that gets some parameters, parameters being the blog post. So if I were to go here, the blog post is what is Sapper. So if I were to return this, so if I go to params, I just do console log dot params, I should be able to see, nope, nothing on my console. That's super. Oh, export let params. There you go. Nope, nothing. Oh, this is the index, right? Radio. Params. Can I? Nope. I have to actually include that. Okay, well, params is empty because we're on the index page. That makes sense. I'm kind of wasting my time here with that. Apologies. But when you're on the index page, you can fetch the blog JSON, which again is this file. And then when you get that, you're using Railroad JavaScript to then get the post response, which is this, an array of posts. You can see it's an array. And then return that as the props to this component. And here you actually have to define those props here. If I wanted to, on this index file, I could actually return foo is I caramba. And if I were to save that, the first error that I'm going to get here is saying that foo index. Okay, it's not complaining. But if I were to go into here, recent posts, h2, and do this, I should get an error that foo is not defined, because again, this is where you define the props, so to speak, in Svelte language. So I'm going to say export let foo, because I'm letting this preload handle it for me. Now if I refresh, there's I caramba, that's coming from over here. Of course, I could inline this if I wanted to, but this is just showing kind of like how this is passing data to then here, which you can then use in your actual component down here, which is pretty clever and actually very intuitive once you understand it. And then if I actually go into an individual blog post, I can then go into here, which is the individual blog posts, which is what's rendered here. And again, this is doing the same thing here, where it's fetching the param slug, the slug being what is Sapper, and then returning that into here. Oh, here we go. If it's 200, then great. If it's error, we got an error. If it's an error, I can say bananas, and that's handled by the error page, which is here. And again, this is all by convention. It is by convention. And there is power in conventions right there, because now you can just start poking things around. So that's pretty cool. Let's go back to where we were. So this is the individual post page. By default, CSS is locally scoped. Can't know which elements are going to appear inside the post block, so we have to use the goal modifier target. So that's it. That makes sense. Essentially, a post can contain its own HTML, so we want to actually style the HTML inside of there. Where are these posts coming from? This right here is coming from this post. Right. So this is the content, what is Sapper, and this content is including HTML in it. And the reason why in the actual blog post template file we're using this global modifier is that we want, there's no way for Sapper or Svelte doesn't really have a way of knowing how to target those things inside of that, so it's letting you say any H2s inside of content, which is the stuff that surrounds the actual blog post, will be styled this way, and we'll include that in there. This is pretty cool. So we got routes, just raw components that we can have. I imagine this was in my layout. You can see I'm importing nav from components to nav, using it here as we usually do. And then nav is taking in a segment argument that lets you actually know which file it's on. I'm going to just modify that for funsies. I'm going to put in a banana, because one of my favorite words to say. So we'll save that, and then we can refresh here, and there's my banana hanging up. So this is kind of cool. This is already very powerful. You can actually make an entire website just with Sapper and a blog just with it. Like, it's pretty built in. You don't have to worry about things. It's probably less code altogether than anything else, and it's going to be fast as well. If I were to look at other parts of this, we have server routes. Again, this is what I was showing, how server routes are modules written in .js that export functions. So you actually can handle a full REST API if you wanted to. This is really cool. File naming rules. Here's the API. This is the client API for that client file, which is in here. So if you go here, you can see sapper.start is right here. You can target which element on the page to enter things inside of. Context, things that you can use. So preload. Preloading is page components can have an optional preload function that will load some data that the page depends on. This is similar to get initial props in Next.js or async data in Next.js. So similar pattern there. Still a little bit of a weird hack that it's kind of reusing things, but it's still keeping in the convention of having single file components, which I do like. Layouts, you can nest routes. Is that it's stores, seeding session stores, so you can add some data there. This is pretty small, which is like amazing how flexible it is with these basic, these kind of like built-in concepts that you could have. And again, this what I love about this is that you actually can handle all server-side things yourself. I'm sure if you wanted to, you could have it be, if you wanted to just build a single page app, building Sapper build. What does Sapper build do? The output is a node app. So Sapper does output a node app, which means that hosting it becomes a little bit more complicated. Whereas Create React App or any other front-end focused frameworks, you can just use Netlify or some other static host and just upload that, and then they can talk to all their APIs from other endpoint. Sapper is all built in, and that's great because you have everything self-contained, but it means that you do need to have somewhere to run a node application if you want to deploy a Sapper project. Export. Production ready to build your site. Okay, so you can actually export it too. Oh, well, I talked too soon and I had an answer in the next section. Shame on me. Which is to say you don't actually need an express server. This is exactly what I just said, so I'm glad we're on the same page here. So Sapper does allow you to export a static site. So that's awesome. And then that is really cool. And that's kind of it. That is honestly like the meat and bones of Sapper as far as their documentation is concerned. You can actually do a lot with this base setup. Like if you had some skunkworks project and you wanted to build together something really quickly, and you already knew HTML and JavaScript, like ES 2015 plus JavaScript, you could go a long way with Sapper for a highly dynamic website that could talk to external endpoints. What's great about this too is like, let's say you have data that depends upon some external API that doesn't have cores enabled. Cores allowing you to do cross-origin resource sharing, meaning that your single page app can talk to an API on a different domain. Because Sapper has a node app built in, you can actually leverage the server-side fetching capabilities of Sapper to pretty much be a proxy for those external APIs so that you're not encumbered by any cores issues at all. This is very cool, and what I love honestly most about Sapper is how simple and how robust their core concepts are. The conventions are very intuitive. If you've ever made applications before and messed around with things of a similar type, having a directory path power the routes of the actual served application makes sense. Typically you write this and want this yourself anyways. If you do have things that don't follow that convention, there is just the components folder. So if you want to just have a reusable components that are made different places, like a button Svelte component, you could put it in the components folder and reuse it in all your different files. Like right now I use Gatsby for my personal website, and if I were to want to remake Gatsby, which is pretty much a blog with Sapper, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, you already saw how you can, this default app is a blog. Like I already have a blog built in, which means that doing it is not too bad. And it's fast and it's small. I'm looking at the code right now. It's also server rendered, so it means that SEO is not an issue at all. It's pretty cool. It's really cool. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about Sapper. If you were to ask me, should you start with Svelte by itself and then move, or start with Sapper to begin with? I don't know if it matters, because Sapper, while it's opinionated and it has conventions, it doesn't have that much additional complexity that you'd essentially the most you'd have to learn is Svelte itself. And if you were to just start with Sapper, there's not that much more that would be foreign to you. There is a little bit of weirdness where you have the built-in Svelte components in Sapper provided by, like the svelte.head to modify the document.title. But I imagine after you browse the Sapper documentation, most of your time learning Sapper and Svelte altogether will be on the Svelte documentation pages themselves, because that's where most of the complexity is in these two technologies. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about Sapper, because if there was something like this for React, that would be awesome. Like having, I guess that is Next.js, which I actually really haven't played around with that much, but maybe I should, because maybe I'll just enjoy it more. But having this kind of be supported by the official maintainer itself gives you a vote of confidence. Like Svelte and Sapper are made by the same person, whereas Next.js is an external project from React, so there's a little bit more. They're not completely entrenched themselves. There's definitely some things there, but it's still very interesting to me. So love to hear your thoughts about this. This was fun to play around with. I should definitely find a project to make with this, because then we can kind of code it together, but maybe for another time. And I will see you again next week with another video. If you are not already a subscriber, please do subscribe down below if you do enjoy these types of content. I make them every week, rain or shine, sunrise or sunset, full moon, waxing moon, waning moon, crescent moon. There's a lot of types of moons. My last name's Wolf. Sometimes I howl at the moon, but I do that ironically, not really because I'm a werewolf. But who told you that I was a werewolf? No one told you that I was a werewolf. If you ever get to this end of the videos, I always love hearing that. So if you want to leave me a little howl in the comments, I'd love to see that. I'd leave a nice little heart, because I like to see this long tail viewership kick in. This long end of the video that has me just kind of talking to you and sharing with you my deepest, darkest secrets and fantasies. But again, I'll see you again next week with a new video for you to watch and learn from.